San Francisco, California. Gold's Gym, North Beach, March 1972. The fog rolled in thick off the bay that morning, wrapping the city in its familiar gray embrace, muting the sounds of traffic and turning streetlights into ghostly halos. Inside Gold's Gym on Columbus Avenue, the atmosphere was warm and humid, thick with the smell of iron and sweat, and that particular scent of serious physical effort that no amount of ventilation could eliminate. This wasn't the famous Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, where bodybuilding legends trained under the California sun. This was the San Francisco location, smaller but no less serious, a place where dedicated athletes came to build their bodies beyond natural limits, where the pursuit of maximum muscle mass was treated with religious devotion. The gym opened at 5 a.m. for the truly dedicated, and by 6 a.m. it was already filling with men whose bodies defied normal human proportions. The walls were exposed brick, painted white decades ago, and now showing age in chips and cracks. The equipment was basic, but effective. Barbells and dumbbells ranging from 5 pounds to numbers that seemed impossible. Benches worn smooth by thousands of hours of use. Squat racks that had supported weights heavy enough to bend lesser steel. The ceiling was high, necessary to accommodate the tallest lifters in their overhead movements, and covered with old water stains that created abstract patterns nobody paid attention to anymore. The soundtrack was constant and hypnotic, iron plates clanking against iron, barbells being racked with controlled crashes, the rhythmic breathing of men pushing their bodies past comfort into growth, the occasional grunt or shout when someone discovered their new maximum. Among the regular morning crew was a man who dominated the space simply by existing in it. His name was Marcus "The Mass" Wellington, and at 320 pounds of deliberately constructed muscle, he was impossible to ignore. Marcus stood 6'5", with shoulders so broad he had to turn sideways to fit through standard doorways, arms that measured 22 inches around, legs like tree trunks, and a chest that seemed to occupy its own zip code. Every visible inch of him was muscle stacked on muscle, the result of 15 years of obsessive training, perfect nutrition, and genetic predisposition toward mass. He wasn't just big, he was architectural, his body a monument to what human dedication could achieve when applied to physical development. Marcus had competed in bodybuilding at the regional level, had placed well, but never won the top prizes because his conditioning, while impressive, couldn't quite match the aesthetic perfection the judges demanded. But he didn't care much about competition anymore. His goal had evolved beyond trophies into something more personal, the pursuit of maximum possible human muscle mass, the desire to see how big a natural human body could become through training alone. He'd been stuck at 315 pounds for 6 months, and breaking through to 320 had required adjusting his entire nutrition and training protocol. Now he was eyeing 330, planning the incremental changes that would get him there, calculating the additional calories and training volume required. Marcus was a believer in size above all else. In his worldview, muscle mass was the ultimate expression of physical achievement, the measurable proof of discipline and effort. He respected powerlifters for their strength, respected Olympic lifters for their explosive power, but in his hierarchy of physical development, bodybuilding sat at the top because it required the most comprehensive approach, the most total dedication to transforming the human body. He had opinions about other forms of physical training, and he wasn't shy about sharing them. Martial arts, in Marcus's view, were performance art for people who didn't want to build real mass. All that kicking and jumping and kata practice, it was athletic and required coordination, but it didn't build the kind of muscle that proved serious dedication. Martial artists were typically small, lean, are more concerned with flexibility and speed than with maximum muscular development. That was fine for their goals, but it wasn't real body work, wasn't the serious pursuit of physical transformation. Marcus was in the middle of his squat workout that Tuesday morning, working through his heavy sets, the barbell loaded with 495 pounds across his massive shoulders. His training partner, a heavyweight bodybuilder named Rick Santos, who weighed a relatively modest 265 pounds, was spotting him, though spotting Marcus was mostly ceremonial. The man was strong enough to handle the weight alone, had the leg development to support loads that would cripple normal humans. He descended into a full squat with perfect form despite the staggering weight, his massive quadriceps controlling the descent, then drove back up with controlled power, making 495 pounds look manageable. He completed his set of 8 reps, racked the barbell with a crash that echoed through the gym, and straightened up with a sound like a building settling. That's when he noticed Bruce Lee. Bruce had entered through the front door maybe 5 minutes earlier, accompanied by James Lee, no relation, a well-known martial artist and author who ran a kung fu school a few blocks away. James was a regular at Gold's, one of the few martial artists who also appreciated serious weight training, and he'd invited Bruce to visit during his trip to San Francisco, thought Bruce might find the serious training atmosphere interesting. Bruce wore simple gray sweatpants and a white tank top, carrying a small gym bag. At 145 pounds, he looked impossibly small in this temple of mass. His lean musculature, impressive in its definition, but dwarfed by the bodybuilders training around him. He was observing the gym with genuine interest, studying the equipment, the training intensity, the dedication these athletes brought to their craft, always looking for principles he could integrate into his own constantly evolving approach to physical development. Marcus noticed Bruce immediately, and his reaction was automatic and dismissive. He grabbed his towel, wiped the sweat from his face, and walked over to where Rick stood. "Who's the skinny guy with James?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying across the gym despite his attempt at discretion. Rick glanced over, recognized Bruce, and his expression shifted to interest. "That's Bruce Lee, man, the martial artist, the guy from those kung fu movies that are getting popular. James trains with him sometimes." Marcus's eyebrows raised. "That's Bruce Lee, the guy everyone's talking about like he's some kind of physical phenomenon." Rick nodded. "Yeah, he's supposed to be incredibly fast, insanely strong for his size. There's stories about him doing things that seem impossible. 1-finger push-ups, 2-finger pull-ups, punching speeds that break measurement equipment." Marcus laughed, not cruelly, but with genuine amusement. "Man, he weighs what? 140 pounds. Maybe 145. I've got dumbbells heavier than him. All that martial arts speed and flexibility stuff, that's fine for what it is. But let's be real. That's not serious physical development. That's just staying lean and athletic. There's no mass there, no real muscle building." Several other bodybuilders had gathered now, drawn by the conversation and the presence of a celebrity, even a small celebrity from a different athletic world. They looked at Bruce with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. These massive men who'd spent years building their bodies, evaluating someone who represented a completely different approach to physical training. James Lee had noticed the attention and was walking over with Bruce, making introductions, clearly proud to show his friend this serious training facility. "Marcus, Rick, this is Bruce Lee," James said enthusiastically. "Bruce, these are some of the most dedicated bodybuilders in San Francisco. Marcus here weighs 320 pounds of muscle." Marcus extended his hand, and Bruce shook it firmly. The size difference was almost comical. Marcus's hand completely engulfing Bruce's, his forearm thicker than Bruce's entire arm. 320 pounds, Bruce observed. "That's remarkable dedication. The nutrition and training required to build and maintain that mass must be extraordinarily disciplined." "It is," Marcus confirmed, pleased that Bruce recognized the effort involved. 6 meals a day, every day, never missing. Training 6 days a week, multiple hours per session. Sleep schedule optimized for recovery. Everything calibrated to support maximum muscle growth. "That's impressive," Bruce said, and his tone suggested genuine respect. "Different goal from what I pursue, but the discipline required is similar. We're both trying to optimize the human body, just for different purposes." Marcus smiled, but there was an edge to it. "Different purposes, yeah. You're optimizing for speed and flexibility and those fancy kicks. I'm optimizing for mass, for size, for actual physical development. No offense, but what you do, it's more like gymnastics. Athletic, sure, but not real bodybuilding." The comment hung in the air, clearly intended to diminish martial arts training, to establish a hierarchy with bodybuilding at the top. Rick looked uncomfortable, sensing this could become confrontational. James Lee's expression showed he'd heard this attitude before and was tired of it. Bruce's face remained neutral, interested, not offended. "You see bodybuilding as superior to martial arts training?" Bruce asked, his tone genuinely curious. "In terms of physical development, absolutely," Marcus replied. "Look at the bodies in this gym. Look at the muscle mass, the size, the obvious results of serious training. Then look at martial artists, skinny guys doing kata and breaking boards. It's not comparable. Martial arts are fine for what they are. Some self-defense skills, some cultural tradition, but they're not serious physical training." Rick tried to intervene. "Marcus, that's not really fair. Different training for different goals doesn't make one superior to another." Marcus waved him off. "I'm just being honest. This guy," he gestured at Bruce, "is famous for being fast and doing movie fights. That's entertainment, not serious athletic development. He probably weighs 140 pounds soaking wet. I've got individual body parts that weigh more than his whole body." Bruce remained calm, but something shifted in his eyes, a focused intensity that people who knew him recognized as engagement rather than anger. "You're right that I weigh significantly less than you, about 175 pounds less, and you're right that our training has different goals. But you're wrong about one thing. What you call serious physical development, maximum muscle mass, that's one dimension of physical capability. There are others." "Like what?" Marcus challenged. "Like being able to actually use your body in a fight. That's the martial arts sales pitch, right? That you're training for real combat. Well, let me tell you something. In a real fight, size matters. Mass matters. If we got into it, I'd just grab you, use my 175-pound advantage, and there's nothing your speed or technique could do about it. Physics is physics. Several bodybuilders had gathered now, drawn by the confrontation, clearly on Marcus's side, viewing Bruce as an outsider, making claims that needed to be tested. James Lee looked worried, recognizing this was escalating beyond friendly conversation. Marcus continued, warming to his theme. Are you martial arts guys? You train against other small guys doing the same techniques. You develop speed because you're not carrying real muscle mass. You can do your fancy kicks because you weigh nothing, but put you against someone with actual size, actual power, and all that technique becomes irrelevant. You're nothing but bones wrapped in a little bit of muscle. You might be bones and muscle, but I'd like to demonstrate something if you're willing, Bruce said calmly. Demonstrate what? That your kung fu works against bodybuilding? Marcus laughed. Sure, demonstrate away. This should be entertaining. Not kung fu specifically, Bruce clarified. Principles of leverage, timing, and understanding human anatomy. One exchange. You attack me however you think your size advantage works best. I'll defend and counter. We'll see whether mass is everything or whether technique can overcome significant weight disadvantages. Rick stepped forward, his voice urgent. Guys, this is a bad idea. Someone could get hurt, and this is supposed to be a friendly gym visit, not a challenge match. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Bruce assured him. Just demonstrate principles. Marcus can attack with full commitment, and I'll show how technique addresses size advantages. If I'm wrong, if his mass overcomes my technique, that proves his point. If I'm right, maybe it opens his mind to other dimensions of physical training. Marcus looked around at his fellow bodybuilders, saw them watching, waiting for his response. His pride was engaged now, his belief system challenged. He'd spent 15 years building 320 pounds of muscle, and this 145-pound martial artist wanted to demonstrate that it didn't matter. Fine, Marcus agreed. One exchange. I'll grab you. Use my size the way it should be used. We'll see how your technique handles 320 pounds of muscle. They cleared space in the center of the gym, moving equipment to create an open area about 15 feet across. The entire gym had stopped training now, maybe 30 bodybuilders gathering to watch, every one of them massive, every one of them clearly expecting Marcus to validate their worldview. That size was supreme. James Lee pulled Bruce aside. Bruce, this guy outweighs you by 175 pounds. He's got reach. He's got strength. He's serious about proving his point. Are you sure about this? I'm sure, Bruce replied quietly. This is exactly why I teach what I teach, and why I've developed principles that work regardless of size differences. Watch. Marcus stood in the center of the cleared space, rolling his massive shoulders, and the movement made his already impressive physique swell even larger. He looked like something from mythology, a titan made flesh, muscles upon muscles, creating a frame that seemed beyond normal human capability. Next to him, Bruce looked like a child, his 145 pounds of lean muscle, impressive in definition, but absolutely dwarfed by Marcus's mass. What kind of attack are you planning? Bruce asked. So I know what to expect. I'm going to grab you, Marcus explained, holding up his massive hands for everyone to see. Bear hug. Use my arms and chest to control you. Squeeze until you can't breathe, or until you submit. That's how size works in real situations. You can't kick me if I'm holding you. Can't punch if your arms are pinned. Your technique becomes useless once I've got my hands on you. Understood, Bruce said simply. Whenever you're ready. Someone in the crowd counted down, and the gym went absolutely silent. 30 massive bodybuilders holding their breath, understanding they were about to witness either the validation of their belief that size was everything, or something that would challenge their fundamental assumptions about physical training. Marcus moved with surprising speed for his size, closing the distance between them in 2 quick steps, his massive arms extending to grab Bruce in the bear hug he'd described, planning to use his 175-pound weight advantage to end this demonstration immediately. But Bruce Lee wasn't there. And what happened next occurred so quickly that most witnesses couldn't process it in real time, would need to discuss it afterward to piece together the sequence. As Marcus's arms closed to grab him, Bruce dropped his center of gravity maybe 6 inches, a subtle movement that made Marcus's grasping hands close above his shoulders instead of around his torso, missing the intended target. Simultaneously, Bruce's right hand shot forward, fingers extended, and struck Marcus directly in the solar plexus with focused precision. The strike wasn't a punch in the traditional sense, wasn't designed to generate massive force through weight transfer. It was a precise application of energy, Bruce's entire body mechanics focused into a single point of impact, targeting the celiac plexus nerve cluster located just below the sternum, on the vulnerable point where the rib cage ended and the diaphragm attached. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Marcus's diaphragm seized, the nerve signal disrupting his ability to breathe, his massive chest suddenly unable to expand despite his desperate attempts to draw air. His arms, which had been extending to grab Bruce, dropped to his sides, useless. His legs, which had been supporting 320 pounds of muscle, suddenly lost their strength. His face went from confident aggression to absolute shock and panic in the span of a microsecond. He stumbled backward 2 steps, both hands flying to his midsection, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, trying desperately to breathe, but finding his respiratory system completely unresponsive. Then his knees gave out, and Marcus, the mass, Wellington, a 320 pounds of deliberately constructed muscle, went down to his knees on the gym floor, gasping, panicking, unable to perform the most basic function of survival. The entire sequence, from Marcus's initial grab attempt to his position on his knees struggling to breathe, took 7 seconds, maybe less. The gym erupted in shocked exclamations. Bodybuilders who'd been confident in size supremacy seconds ago were now staring with their mouths open, unable to process what they'd witnessed. Their champion, their 320-pound example of maximum human muscle development, was on his knees, helpless, defeated by a man who weighed 175 pounds less. If you're watching this story and learning about Bruce Lee's real fighting ability for the first time, if this is showing you a completely different side of martial arts than you've ever seen, hit that subscribe button right now, because there are dozens more documented stories like this that prove Bruce Lee wasn't just a movie star, but a legitimate martial artist who could back up every claim he made. Bruce knelt beside Marcus, his expression concerned rather than triumphant. Breathe slowly. Try to relax. Your diaphragm is in spasm from the strike to your celiac plexus. It will pass in about 20 to 30 seconds. The panic makes it worse. Stay calm. Marcus's eyes locked onto Bruce's face, and the expression there was pure fear, the fear of someone who suddenly couldn't breathe, whose body had stopped obeying commands, who thought they might be dying. "Please," Marcus gasped out, barely audible. Can't breathe." "You can," Bruce said firmly, but kindly. "Your lungs work. Your body works. The neural signal is disrupted, but it's already recovering. Focus on small breaths. Don't fight it. Let your nervous system reboot." Rick Santos had rushed to Marcus's side, kneeling next to his training partner. "What did you do to him?" Rick's voice was angry and scared. "I struck his celiac plexus with focused energy," Bruce explained, his tone purely educational. "It's a nerve cluster that controls diaphragm function. When struck correctly, it causes temporary paralysis of the breathing muscles. No permanent damage, no broken ribs, no organ trauma, just neural disruption that the body recovers from naturally." "But he can't breathe," Rick protested. "He can breathe. His nervous system just needs time to reset," Bruce replied. "Watch. It's already happening." And it was. After about 25 seconds that probably felt like an eternity to Marcus, his diaphragm began functioning again. He drew a shallow, gasping breath, then another deeper one. Color was returning to his face, his panic subsiding as his body remembered how to perform its most basic function. After another 15 seconds, he was breathing almost normally, though still shaken, still on his knees, still processing what had just happened to him. The gym was absolutely silent now, 30 bodybuilders watching their champion struggle to his feet, with help from Rick and James Lee, seeing their fundamental belief about size supremacy challenged in the most direct way possible. And if you're enjoying this story, if you're fascinated by these real accounts of Bruce Lee demonstrating his principles, hit that like button. It helps more people discover the truth about what Bruce Lee could actually do. Marcus stood unsteadily, testing his breathing, finding it painful but functional. He looked at Bruce with completely new eyes, the earlier dismissiveness and superiority completely gone, replaced by genuine respect and something close to awe. "I've been hit by heavyweight boxers," Marcus said, his voice still hoarse. "I've taken punches that should have broken ribs, but that was different. You didn't hit me hard, you hit me precisely, and it was more effective than any power punch I've ever taken." "Exactly," Bruce confirmed. "Your muscle mass, all 320 pounds of it, provides no protection against neural disruption. I wasn't attacking your muscles, I was attacking the nervous system that controls your muscles. Your size became irrelevant because I wasn't trying to overcome your size through force. I was targeting a vulnerability that size can't protect." One of the other bodybuilders, a massive heavyweight named Tom Chen, spoke up from the crowd. "But that only works if you can actually reach the target. If Marcus had gotten his hands on you first, if he'd successfully grabbed you, your strike wouldn't have mattered." "That's true," Bruce agreed, "which is why the first principle is not being where the attack expects you to be." Marcus grabbed for my torso at shoulder height. I lowered my center of gravity 6 inches, his hands closed on empty air. Evasion before interception, interception before blocking, blocking before absorbing. If you can't be hit, the opponent's power doesn't matter. Marcus had recovered enough to think clearly now, and his analytical mind was working through what had happened. "You made it look easy, like I was moving in slow motion. How did you know where I was going to grab?" "You told me," Bruce explained. "You announced your strategy. Bear hug using your arms and chest. You're 320 pounds. You move in predictable ways because your muscle mass constrains your mobility. Your shoulder rotation told me your arms were extending before they actually moved. I responded to your intention, not your action. Rick Santos was studying Bruce with new appreciation. Mr. Lee, I've been bodybuilding for 12 years. I thought I understood physical training, understood what made someone physically capable. You just showed me. I understood maybe 20% of it. Bruce's expression was kind. You understand bodybuilding extremely well. Understand how to build maximum muscle mass. That's legitimate expertise in its domain. But fighting is a different domain, requires different optimization. What works for aesthetic muscle development doesn't always translate to combat effectiveness. Several bodybuilders had their phones out, some taking pictures, one recording video, understanding they'd witnessed something significant. Marcus looked around at his fellow athletes, saw them watching him, waiting for his response. I called you nothing but bones, Marcus said to Bruce, and his voice carried genuine humility now. Said your martial arts were just gymnastics, not serious physical training. I was completely wrong, and I apologize. You've obviously developed something real, something that works against size advantages I thought were insurmountable. No apology necessary, Bruce replied. You were operating with the information you had. Your size has given you success in bodybuilding, which reinforced certain beliefs. Today you discovered that fighting has more dimensions than muscle mass. That's all. Can you teach me? Marcus asked suddenly. Whatever principles you used, whatever training created that precision and timing, I want to learn it. Before Bruce could answer, Tom Chen stepped forward. Make that two of us. I've spent 10 years building my body, thinking bigger meant better in every context. You just proved that's not true. Bruce looked around at these massive men, these dedicated bodybuilders who'd spent years pursuing maximum muscle mass, now genuinely interested in learning from someone who weighed half what they did. What I teach requires unlearning before you can learn, Bruce said carefully. You've built reflexes around your size, trained yourselves to use mass as your primary tool. Learning what I teach means accepting that sometimes less mass is better, that flexibility matters more than maximum strength, that speed comes from efficiency rather than power. Are you willing to question everything you've built your training around? I am, Marcus said immediately, and several voices echoed agreement. Rick Santos added his perspective. Bruce, these guys are serious athletes. They know how to train hard, how to be disciplined, how to push through discomfort. They've just never had someone show them that their approach had limitations. If you're willing to teach, they'll be dedicated students. Bruce pulled out a card, wrote something on the back, and handed it to Marcus. This is my school's address in Oakland. Come by next week. Bring anyone serious about training. We'll start with fundamentals. I'd see if you can handle the ego adjustment required, because the hardest part won't be the physical training. It'll be accepting that your 320 pounds of muscle doesn't make you superior in fighting, just specialized for bodybuilding. Marcus took the card like it was precious. I'll be there, and I'll bring an open mind. After today, after feeling that helpless, I know I've got a lot to learn. If you've made it this far in the story, if you're still engaged in learning, leave a comment below, telling me what surprised you most. Was it how quickly Bruce handled Marcus, the precision of the strike, the humble response afterward? I read every comment, and want to know what resonates with you. The atmosphere in Gold's Gym had completely transformed. What started as dismissive hostility toward the small martial artist had become eager curiosity and respect. Bodybuilders who'd been confident in size supremacy 30 minutes ago were now asking detailed questions, requesting demonstrations, wanting to understand principles they'd never considered. Bruce spent the next hour conducting an impromptu seminar, demonstrating techniques, explaining biomechanics, answering questions from genuinely interested athletes. He showed them the strike he'd used on Marcus, breaking down the targeting, the energy transfer, the neural disruption. He demonstrated evasion principles, showing how minimal movement could make large attacks miss completely. He explained the relationship between muscle mass and speed, why bodybuilders were typically slower than martial artists despite being stronger. And the bodybuilders absorbed everything, taking notes, trying techniques under Bruce's guidance, their entire perspective on physical training expanding to include dimensions they'd never explored. James Lee watched with satisfaction, having known this would happen, having seen Bruce transform skeptics into students dozens of times. Tom Chen asked a question that several others were clearly thinking. Bruce, if we start training in martial arts, learning what you teach, will we need to lose muscle mass? Will we have to choose between being bodybuilders and being effective fighters? Not necessarily, Bruce replied. Excessive mass will slow you down. That's physics. But you can maintain significant size while developing speed and technique. The question is what you're optimizing for. If your goal is maximum possible muscle mass for bodybuilding competition, that will constrain your fighting effectiveness. If your goal is being a strong, muscular person who can also fight effectively, you can achieve both with intelligent training. Marcus had been listening carefully to every word, his analytical mind already planning how he'd approach this new training, how he'd integrate martial arts principles with his bodybuilding foundation. Mr. Lee, when you struck me, was that full power? Or were you holding back? Holding back significantly, Bruce confirmed. Full power to that target could cause serious injury, possibly stop your heart if the energy transfer was severe enough. What you felt was maybe 30% power, just enough to demonstrate the principle without causing damage beyond temporary breathing disruption. Marcus touched his solar plexus, which was still tender. 30% put me on my knees, unable to breathe. What would full power do? Probably render you unconscious, possibly cause cardiac arrest depending on exact placement and timing, Bruce said matter-of-factly, which is why I'm very careful in demonstrations, why I emphasize control before power in training. Knowledge without control is dangerous. The weight of that statement settled on the bodybuilders, understanding that Bruce had been extraordinarily careful with Marcus despite being challenged and mocked, had demonstrated his point without actually hurting anyone, had shown both skill and character. Before we finish, I need to ask one favor. If this story gave you new perspective on Bruce Lee, on bodybuilding, on martial arts, on what real fighting effectiveness looks like, and please share this video. Send it to someone who lifts weights and thinks size is everything, who bodybuilds and thinks muscle mass is the only measure of physical development. Sharing helps preserve these real stories and spread these lessons. The photographer who'd been taking pictures approached Bruce. Mr. Lee, I work for Iron Man magazine, a bodybuilding publication. Can I interview you about what happened today, about the relationship between muscle mass and fighting effectiveness. Bruce considered, then shook his head. I'd rather not do an interview that might be seen as attacking bodybuilding. What happened today was educational, not confrontational. Marcus challenged me. I demonstrated principles. He learned something. That's all. But the photographer persisted. This could help a lot of bodybuilders understand that their training has limitations, that there's more to physical development than maximum muscle mass. Isn't that valuable? Talk to Marcus, Bruce suggested. If he wants to share his experience, that's his choice. I'm just the teacher who demonstrated a lesson. Marcus was standing nearby and overheard the exchange. I'll do the interview, Marcus said. People need to hear this, need to understand that size isn't everything. I've spent 15 years building 320 pounds of muscle thinking that made me physically superior to everyone smaller than me. Bruce just showed me I was operating with incomplete knowledge. That's worth sharing. The interview appeared in Iron Man magazine 6 weeks later, a detailed account of what happened at Gold's Gym in San Francisco, complete with photographs of Marcus on his knees and Bruce demonstrating techniques. The article was titled, When 320 Pounds Met Precision, a Bodybuilder's Humbling Lesson. Marcus's testimony was brutally honest, describing his earlier dismissiveness of martial arts, his confidence that size overcame technique, his shock at being so thoroughly defeated in 7 seconds, and his gratitude for the lesson that opened his mind to new approaches to physical training. The article created significant discussion in bodybuilding communities. Some readers dismissed it as fabricated or exaggerated, unable to accept that a 145-pound martial artist could defeat a 320-pound bodybuilder. Others recognized the truth in Marcus's account, saw it as validation of what they'd suspected, and that bodybuilding created a specific type of physique that wasn't necessarily optimal for actual fighting. Marcus Wellington became one of Bruce Lee's dedicated students, making the trip to Oakland twice a week for the next 18 months, until Bruce's death in 1973. He maintained his bodybuilding, but reduced his overall mass to about 285 pounds, optimizing for functional strength and speed rather than maximum size. His movement quality improved dramatically. His flexibility increased. His understanding of combat deepened. He never competed in fighting, never tested himself that way, but he integrated what he learned into a more complete approach to physical development. Tom Chen and 5 other bodybuilders from Gold's Gym also became regular students, forming a small group of massive men studying under a teacher who weighed half what they did, learning that true mastery wasn't about size, but about understanding, precision, timing, and the humility to recognize that expertise in one domain didn't translate to expertise in all domains. Years after Bruce's death, Marcus was interviewed for a martial arts documentary. He was in his 50s then, still impressively muscular but leaner, moving with a fluidity that bodybuilders rarely achieved. The interviewer asked about the famous 7 seconds at Gold's Gym. Marcus's answer was thoughtful and moving. He described the moment of not being able to breathe, the panic, the complete helplessness, the realization that all his carefully built muscle mass provided zero protection against someone who understood human anatomy and neural disruption. But he emphasized that the real lesson wasn't the physical defeat. It was the intellectual humbling, the understanding that he'd been operating with incomplete knowledge, that his confidence had been based on limited information, that there were entire dimensions of physical capability he'd never explored. He described Bruce not as someone who humiliated him, but as someone who educated him, who demonstrated principles and then offered to teach them, who showed both skill and character in how he handled the situation. The documentary included photographs from that day, showing the size difference between Bruce and Marcus, the moment of the strike, Marcus on his knees, and later images of Marcus training at Bruce's school, this massive bodybuilder learning to move with precision rather than just power. A Gold's Gym. North Beach continued operating for another decade before economic changes forced it to close, but during those years, it became known as one of the few bodybuilding gyms where martial arts training was taken seriously, where fighters learned to appreciate size and strength, and where bodybuilders learned to appreciate technique and precision. The story of what happened that March morning became part of gym lore, told to new members, used to illustrate that physical training had more dimensions than muscle mass alone, that true mastery required understanding multiple approaches rather than assuming one path was superior to all others. Hit that subscribe button one final time if you haven't already, because Bruce Lee's story is filled with moments like this, 7-second exchanges that shattered certainty, demonstrations that proved the impossible, humble teachings that transformed understanding and opened minds to possibilities beyond their current knowledge. The legacy of those 7 seconds extends beyond one gym, beyond Marcus Wellington's personal transformation, beyond even the bodybuilding community's gradual acceptance. That size wasn't everything. It represented a meeting point between different philosophies of physical development, between maximizing muscle mass and optimizing functional capability, between aesthetic achievement and combat effectiveness. Neither approach was proven wrong. Both were proven incomplete, and from that incompleteness came integration, evolution, growth. Marcus Wellington weighed 320 pounds of deliberately constructed muscle, had spent 15 years building the ultimate bodybuilding physique, and believed his size made him superior in any physical confrontation. Bruce Lee weighed 145 pounds, had never pursued maximum muscle mass, had optimized his body for completely different purposes. By every conventional measure in the bodybuilding world, Marcus should have dominated him easily, his size and strength overwhelming any technique the smaller man possessed. But in 7 seconds, Bruce proved that fighting has dimensions, bodybuilding doesn't explore, that neural disruption overcomes muscle mass, that precision defeats power, that understanding combat at a deep level allows you to defeat opponents who are physically superior in traditional metrics. Marcus called Bruce nothing but bones, dismissed martial arts as gymnastics for people who couldn't build real muscle, challenged him to prove that technique mattered more than size. For 7 seconds later, Marcus was on his knees, struggling to breathe, his worldview shattered, his education beginning, his certainty replaced by humility and hunger to learn. 7 seconds that changed one man's life and influenced hundreds more who heard the story, who saw the photographs, who read the interview, who understood that confidence based on incomplete knowledge is fragile, but confidence based on deep understanding is unshakable. Bruce Lee weighed 145 pounds. Marcus Wellington weighed 320 pounds. Bruce optimized for combat. Marcus optimized for size. And in 7 seconds, Bruce demonstrated that when different optimizations meet, The one designed for actual fighting tends to win, not because it's superior in all ways, but because fighting is what it was designed for. While maximum muscle mass was designed for completely different purposes and simply couldn't protect against someone who knew exactly where and how to strike to make all that carefully built mass completely irrelevant.